In August 2021, I spent a week in the Pacific Northwest, touring big cities, national parks, riverways, and beaches. This was my first time in the Northwest, so I was anxious to see a new part of the U.S. The Pacific Northwest might feel very far from the rest of the country, but it is definitely worth seeing. I live in the St. Louis area, so flying from St. Louis to Seattle was around a 4-hour flight. When traveling from the east to the northwest, you almost feel like you have traveled to another country, since you fly over so much undeveloped land in the Great Plains, and then over the Rocky Mountains. By the time you land in Seattle, it feels like you have traveled much further than you actually have. While it might feel distant, over 13 million people call the Pacific Northwest home, so it is no small area. I began my journey in Seattle, Washington. The main purpose of my trip to the Northwest was to spend time in nature, so I didn't spend too much time in the city. As of 2020, Seattle had around 737,000 residents, with around 4 million residents in the metro area. Some of the highlights of my time in Seattle were the Pike Place Market, Pier 57, and the Space Needle. The Space Needle opened in 1962 for the Century 21 exposition, which was a space-age themed World's Fair. It took around 400 days to build this 605-foot tall structure. It really looks less like a needle and more like the Jetsons' home, but that's just my opinion. What a lot of people don't know is that the Space Needle actually has 2 observation deck levels. The top is open air with great opportunities for photos and videos, and the bottom level is enclosed with a revolving glass floor. In 2018, this new addition became the world's first revolving glass floor. There is limited parking here, so it is recommended that you park at the paid parking lots at the Seattle Center nearby, or take the monorail. Driving east of the Seattle Metro for about 30 minutes, you will stumble upon a large, 270-foot tall waterfall named Snoqualmie Falls. More than 1.5 million visitors visit these beautiful falls every year. Here, you will find a park, gift shop, free parking, and the Salish Lodge. The Salish Lodge and Spa is owned by the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. This lodge originally started out as an 8-room inn built in 1916. Today there are 86 guest rooms in this beautiful hotel, with some of them even facing the waterfall. The lodge has a northwestern feel to it and is contemporary and relaxing. The lodge even has its own beehives. You can enjoy the honey from these hives in their 4-course country breakfast. You might recognize the lodge from the opening credits of the show Twin Peaks. My next stop on my trip through the Pacific Northwest is Mount Rainier National Park. This was my favorite place I visited while in the Northwest. Mount Rainier National Park is a 235,000-acre park around the 14,400-foot tall Mount Rainier, which is still an active volcano. This national park was established in the year 1899. This volcano is huge. You really don't get a good perspective of how large it truly is until you stand in the parking lot of the Paradise Inn and then look up. You might have to use the panorama setting on your camera to get the whole volcano in one shot. Mount Rainier is actually the tallest standalone peak in the lower 48. The national park is about 68 miles south of Seattle and 95 miles north of Portland. There are plenty of lodging options nearby. You will find anything from hotels, lodges, bed and breakfasts, spas, and even a treehouse. Surrounding the park there are some restaurants and a few small stores. I don't remember there being too many places with clean and functional amenities to stop along the way from Seattle, so make sure you're prepared for the 90-minute or so drive. There are 240 miles of well-maintained trails here. Hikers of all abilities will find a trail here that is suitable for them. I didn't have too much of an agenda while I was here. I just enjoyed driving around until I found a trail and taking it to see where it leads. If you are worried about Mount Rainier being an active volcano, don't worry. The last time it erupted was in the year 1854. During my visit, I asked a park ranger if we were safe being so close to the volcano. He assured me that with this volcano being located within the national park system, It is one of the most heavily monitored active volcanoes in the world, so visitors would have weeks, if not months, of warning to evacuate before another eruption. That being said, it would be good to check the volcano conditions online before planning a trip, just in case. Olympic National Park is our next stop on our journey around the Pacific Northwest. Olympic is located on the peninsula in the northwestern part of Washington state. Olympic is the only place in the lower 48 where you can visit an actual rainforest. This place is cool. Other than a small section of a rainforest I went through in Honduras, this is the only other place I've visited where I have been able to enter a rainforest. I had always wanted to visit one, so I was excited to go hiking here. An interesting fact is that this national park actually contains the quietest spot in the continental US. According to sources that I will post in the description below, Gordon Hempton, who considers himself to be an acoustic ecologist, started a project in the 80s where he catalogs quiet spots on our planet. The criteria for being a quiet spot involves it needing to have at least 15 minutes of total silence from man-made objects during daylight hours. With all of the traffic noise and jet engine noise, there are very few spots that remain. However, one such spot remains, and it is right here in Olympic. I didn't know this fact until after I returned home, so I was unable to visit there, but there is one particular log along the Hoh River Trail that is completely untouched by noise pollution. How cool. Olympic has 3 distinct sections to it: the Olympic Mountains, the rainforests, and the wilderness coastline. In these 3 sections, you will find fishing, boating, hiking, camping, backpacking, and night sky programs. Due to the fact that there is a lot to do here and that it is a few hours away from Seattle, I wouldn't recommend you make a day drive from your hotel in Seattle just to spend a few hours here. You will want to get a hotel nearby so you can spend a few days here. I stayed in a hotel in a suburb near Tacoma, so I was a bit closer to Olympic and still not too far from Seattle. But if I could do it again, I would reserve a hotel closer to Olympic and spend a few days there. One of my favorite places in Olympic was Ruby Beach. You won't have a hard time finding a good picture opportunity here. In addition to visiting Washington, I also visited the northern part of Oregon. I took a drive down the Columbia River Highway east of Portland. Lewis and Clark would have come into the area using the Columbia River, so it's neat to look out at the river on your drive and try to imagine what it would have been like for Lewis and Clark and their party to be sailing in on their important journey across the West. There were many places along this road that I enjoyed, such as the Vista House and all of the waterfalls, but the one place I want to emphasize was Multnomah Falls. Multnomah Falls is the most visited natural recreation site in the Pacific Northwest, with over 2 million visitors a year. At 620 feet tall, Multnomah is Oregon's tallest waterfall. There are 2 sections to the falls, the upper and the lower. At the Multnomah Falls Lodge, there is a gift shop, restrooms, a visitor center, and a restaurant with breathtaking views of the falls that you can see out of their floor-to-ceiling windows and their skylights above the dining room. When I visited in 2021, there was a fee you had to pay to get up close to the falls. Multnomah Falls is only about 30 miles east of Portland, but I wouldn't recommend driving there just to see the falls. I would recommend visiting some of the other waterfalls along the way, and stopping at each pullout on the road for a picture or 2. The northwestern coast of Oregon gives you many things. It gives you beautiful ocean views like in Rockaway Beach, historic sites like Fort Clatsop, where Lewis and Clark ended their famous journey, tourist spots like the Tillamook Creamery, and much more. One place I would like to highlight is the Astoria Column. This 125-foot tall column was dedicated by the Great Northern Railway in 1926. By walking up the narrow 164-step spiral staircase inside the column to the top, you will get some epic views of the ocean, Columbia River, Washington State, and downtown Astoria. I also visited Ecola State Park near Cannon Beach along the coast. There are great places to hike, picnic, or just take in the sweeping views. You might recognize Ecola from a few movies that were filmed here. The Goonies, Free Willy, and Kindergarten Cop all had scenes that were filmed here. I could talk a lot more about my trip to the Northwest, but I just wanted to focus on the highlights of my trip in this video, with hopes that it will encourage you to go explore the Northwest yourself. Or maybe you have been there before and would like to return after learning some new things you hadn't tried before. I wish I would have had time to drive further south into Northern California to see the redwoods, but I will have to make a separate trip for that. The Northwest is big and spread out, so you don't want to cram too much into your trip. It's best to see fewer things and spend more time at each than to see a bunch of sites and only spend a short time at each one. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please leave a thumbs up and share it with your friends.